Welcome you all to Trek Wars.
So today's video is going to be about the light cruiser V-1 Starglider and Night Flyer. So first off, the Night Flyer has a shield index of 0.5, has a hold off of 4.25, and a refreshment rate of 0.85, and a breakdown of just 1. So you look at these stats, you can tell that this ship is one of the weakest ships that we have reviewed, and there's a good reason for this. This is actually one of the oldest ships on these lists. Now, the V-1 Starglider sensors are 0.85. Its short-range sensors are 0.85. It has no shuttlecrafts. It has a cost of $51,396.45. It has a construction of 40, and it has ECM of 0.8, and it has a hull value of 51,000. Its length is only 60 meters. Its crew is 135, and its cargo is 120. Now, the impulse power is 0.75, its warp power is 0.75, and its optimal warp speed is 7, and its max is 8. So, right off the bat, we do see some very interesting things about this ship. It is very fast, but it lacks a lot of maneuverability that you would be expecting from a ship of its size. Alright, so now its weaponry, its phaser power is 0.85, which is below average, but it has 6 disruptors, and it has 1 plasma cannon. This is a lot of firepower for a ship of its time period, and there's a reason for it, and we'll break this down and look at this ship and its lure and history in just a minute. But right off the bat, its recharge rate is pretty good for a ship that was created in 2240. Now, this ship stayed operation all the way up until 2263, but this ship never saw combat with the Federation. Now remember, we're comparing this to Rift-class starships. So compared to Rift-class starships, there's some things that stand out. Number one, the ship is not very large, it's not very maneuverable, and the construction is relatively decent, but the ship itself is very, very fast, but very poorly armed, and has very little in defense, but has a lot of offense, and there's a good reason for this. The Starglider was the first modern Romulan starship. It was intended to be a long-range version of the famed Seocorps warbird hull type from the Romulan War with the Federation. The Albert fitted with more modern engines and onboard systems. The idea was that it would take the place of the bulkier Krakers and capsize class cruisers, freeing them from more important duties. Internal space were extremely cramped even by Romulan standards, even for a pre-modern Romulan starship, which apparently prevented Stargliders from fulfilling its design mission profile. As a result, it was deployed as a fleet auxiliary, supplementing large and more versatile vessels, and in its role, it achieved a measure of success. The Death Flyer variant, the aka the Vastoria Latima, which ungunned the design and expended the crew and range, made it double in following years. It was designed for border patrol duties in contest areas that saw action against both the Gorn and the Klingons. Alright, so let's take a look at a breakdown of the history or information that was just given to us. So, this ship was designed to actually be the mainstream cruiser, but because the Romulans during this time period did not have the technological know-how to create very large starships that were capable of quick warp speeds. So, they're left between two choices. You can have a larger ship that's very slow, or you can have a small ship that's very fast. They don't have the ability or the structural integrity knowledge at this point in time to build extremely fast, large, warp-capable starships. Like all Romulan starships of this area, the Star Glider was designed to be capable of planetary landings. The extended wing structures made was provided to enable the Star Glider to better handle low power atmospheric flights and extended durations. This is from where the class gets its name. The design is widely regarded as a distant ancestor to the later S-11 bird of prey. The extended wing atmospheric landing takeoff capabilities of the Starglider would become a recognizable design feature of the so-called wing generation of Romulan starships. Now, the specifications: the length is 60 meters, the beam is 162 meters, the draft is 40 meters, the mass is 51,000, and the crew is 135. It's armed with 6 disruptors, 4 plasma torpedoes. The cruising speed is warp 7. The maximum speed is warp 8. And innovations for this is the first modern Romulan Starship class. Deflects 2270 data analysis. The Death Flyer's upgunning is believed to have consisted of 2 additional beam weapon banks and a heavier bore plasma weapon system. It's also noted that the Federation had never engaged the ship, and once it did see the ship for its first time, it was in the far future, around 2276, and the ship was actually belonging to just standard civilian craft by this time period. So in 2155, there was a war between Earth and the Romulans before the Earth was part of the Federation or the creation of the Federation. Now, the ships and the designs of this time period are very strange. They're very bizarre and submarine looking, and they're very slow. And on the Romulan side, what we're seeing here is one variant of their ships, a common cruiser of this time period known as the Cabbage class, had very powerful plasma weapons. Now, these are what I'm going to refer to as a Generation 1 starship, and they were all very slow and very sluggish, but the Romulans had more advanced weaponry. So their plasma-based weapons could easily destroy the counterparts of Earth. So this is a kind of a understanding or look at some of the ships that we have. So I have them as the Cabbage type as a 1.5. So ships that we normally see are the ships that we had seen from the series Enterprise, like for example the Romulan ship that laid the mines and surprised the Enterprise itself is it's referred to as a Tavaro class, and those are at this time period a Type 2 or second generation starship and are much more advanced but are very rare. So the Cabbage class, I would give it as a 1.5. It's almost like a medium point between a Type 1 generation starship and a Type 2 because it had basically Type 2 weaponry. So get an understanding of what the Earth forces look like. Most of their ships were these bizarre short-range turret-based weaponry, and they were Type 1. They may not even had shielding. Then there was the Type 1.5 ships that we're kind of talking about. These are the mid-range, with newer technology, but not quite there. And the Daedalus is a prime example of this. So I forget the name of it, but they use some kind of plate energized armor system, and it's not really shielding, but it's the beginning stages or the first generations of that technology, which would later become shields. So this ship, the reason why I want to talk about this ship is relatively easy to construct. And during the war with the Romulans and Earth, the other races like Vulcans, Andorians, and a few other races, which had Generation 2 class starships, were actually building these ships on behalf of Earth because they were afraid of the Romulan advancement. So what ended up happening is Earth was pumping out a lot of 1.5 generation starships, so much so that they were able to defeat the Romulans through attrition. So, a common misconception is that there were tons of NX class starships. This is not really the case. There were very few of these ships. The NX class or NX class variant starships, the second generation, the true second generation starships, the Warp 5 capable starships, were very rare and took a long time to build. Now they existed, but they would basically be like a captains of a fleet or something of that nature. There were very few of them. The Romulans lost because of logistics, plain and simple. So ships were very slow, supplies were very limited, and the Romulans felt that they were just going to be able to go in there, wipe out Earth's defenses, Earth's ships, and take a quick victory. They did not realize that Earth had such a large industrial complex that they were able to build ships so much faster than the Romulans. And basically, towards the end of the war, the Romulans had lost so many of their second generation starships, and they had lost pretty much all of their first generation or the 1.5 generation starships, and they basically had depleted their own forces through attrition. And they realized they couldn't continue the fight with Earth, and then they pulled out. Now, a secondary issue with the Federation versus the Romulan ships is the Romulan ships had the superior firepower, and that was what made them so arrogant. But Federation 1.5 and second generation starships were far more maneuverable than their Romulan counterparts. And so they were actually able to maneuver themselves away from Romulan weaponry, attack them during their weak spots, and destroy their ships. So even though the Romulans were technologically more advanced than Earth forces, Earth had superior tactics and a superior industry. Earth attrition tactics paid off. They defeated and destroyed most of the Romulan Empire's fleet. With the Romulan Empire being so weakened, its enemies took the opportunity to attack it. Two of the primary races that attacked the Romulans were the Klingons, which actually captured some of the worlds because the Romulan Star Empire was so short on starships, they didn't even have enough ships to defend their territory anymore, and the Klingons took advantage of this. The other race that openly attacked was the Gorn, and the Gorn did hit and run tactics against the Romulans because they lacked the ability to protect their shipping lanes and their systems, and they were getting hit and run and attacked by both these other empires. So they were desperate to come up with a solution to this issue. And finally, the V-1 Star Glider came into service. In 2240, the ship was produced, and it wasn't just produced. Over 120 of these starships were produced, and they were the first Generation 3 starships. Now, on top of that, not even a year later, a second variant, more well-armed variant came out, and an additional 40 starships were created. So the third generation starship was produced of 140 of these starships were put into action. Now, what made this ship so important is it had 4 forward-facing disruptors, 2 rear-facing disruptors, and a newer plasma variant torpedo. Now, I want to note it's not the same plasma torpedo that we see Captain Kirk face, but it's a much more advanced weapon than anything the Romulans had ever used before. So the V-1s are only 60 meters long. Compared to other ships at the time period, they're relatively small. So a lot of Gorn as well as Klingon ships like the D6 were around 216 meters. So in order to compensate for this, they would fight in wolf packs. Now, these V-1 starships are a new generation starship. They are as well armed as a cruiser, but they are the size of a standard raider or a destroyer. So they had the firepower of a cruiser aboard a small ship of only 60 meters. Now, these ships were on the Gorn border, and fought the Gorn often, and they destroyed many Gorn cruisers. Now, they don't have the ability, the shielding, to take on a Gorn ship on a one-on-one, but in a pack, they are perfectly capable of destroying a Gorn ship in a small wolf pack of 2 or 3. The reason they're able to destroy cruisers and ships that are so much larger than themselves, it's not because of their shielding, it's because of their overwhelming firepower. Having 4 forward-facing disruptors as well as a plasma torpedo meant that this ship could hit far above its own class or weight. Now, by the time that the Federation and the Romulan Star Empire engaged themselves again, they were using newer, more advanced starships. And this third generation starship had become so old and so obsolete by this time that by the time that the D7 was being created by the Klingons and the Federation was using Constellation class starships, and we know that the Romulan Star Empire was using the Bird of Prey, this ship wasn't even in service anymore. So by this time, the ships were either decommissioned or they were being sold to the civilian market. Now, the ship is very small, and during its heyday, it really never ever operated as a long-range cruiser like it was meant to be. It operated more like a bird of prey. And so the bird of prey that we all know, that design of having a small starship with overwhelming firepower for its size was first introduced by the V-1 Star Glider and its counterpart, the Night Flyer, and would eventually be rebirthed into the S-11 Bird of Prey. So I find this lure very interesting because the very first time we see the Klingon Bird of Prey on screen attacking the Enterprise Constitution class, you see it fires what looks like a torpedo, but it doesn't look like a torpedo. It's like a green ball of energy. It was actually a plasma torpedo. So, and the reason why that ship that had the cloaking device, and it was a Romulan ship with a cloaking device, it was so odd, is because it had been purchased by the Romulan Star Empire. That's why the ship looked so old. You know, we all think of it as a Klingon Bird of Prey. It was a new ship, but it looked really old and rusty. Is because it was. It was just an old S-11 scout ship created by the Romulans. Very, very cool, very interesting lure, and I really hope you guys enjoyed this. Alright, if you guys enjoyed this, you want to know where this came from. It came from the Federation Spaceflight Chronological Romulan Star Empire book. Really fun, really cool, an older book, and very fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy this style of a little more lure with the breakdown and power levels of our starships. Some additional really interesting lore about this ship is it stayed active up until 2261, and the ship destroyed a lot of Gorn ships. And a interesting fact about this is the Klingon alliance with the Romulans was based upon an alliance between the Gorn and the Federation. So we'll get a bit into some of the other starships of this time period a little bit later, but I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. And with that being said, we're out of here. For watching Trek Wars. If you like this material, please subscribe and make a comment. And with that being said, victory is life.